So, hello everyone. I would like to start our webinar. I would like to welcome all of you. I'm very pleased to introduce this webinar on a very specific topic to all of our participants. And I'm also very pleased that we were able to invite experts in our topic. It's shearing and animal welfare demanded by consumers, but are we really prepared? So we will try to cover this topic by all different aspects. That means from scientific aspects, from the animal welfare aspect, also from the textile industry, and we also would like to invite you then to participate in our discussion. So first of all, I would like to just shortly introduce our working group, and I will open the first slide. This webinar is organized on behalf of the EAAP Animal Fiber Working Group. This group has been founded in 2007 by a group of international scientists working on biology and economy of animal fiber science and animal tegument production. Our aims are to create a network of investigation, to organize meetings in order to facilitate the interchange of information and also to encourage the dissemination of knowledge of animal fiber science. You're welcome to visit our homepage, which is placed on the EAAP homepage, and you also see who is the president at the moment. It's Juan Pablo from Spain. The vice president is Carlo Ranieri from Italy, and our secretary is Maria from the University in Austria. So we are a very international group of scientists, and we also would like to draw your attention to our activity. Apart from this webinar, we organized the 8th European Symposium on South American camelids and the 1st European meeting on fiber animals, which this year will take place in Bolzano in Italy. You're very much welcome to also to visit this symposium. The organizers are Matthias Gauli. Many of you might know him. He was president of EAAP before, and Andrea Rosati, also from EAAP. We are very thankful for the support of the EAAP, and we are very pleased to work within the scientific board as our animal working group. So this is the program for this afternoon. After my short introduction, we will shift over to the first presentation by Christoph Winkler on animal welfare and extensive production systems, and he focuses on the alpaca. The next talk will be done by Alonso Burgos from Peru. He will talk on alpaca shearing as a way to sustainability. We might have a shorter or longer coffee break, depending on the questions which are coming in. And the next talk will then, after the break, be by Marlene Kirchner from Austria. And she will talk on assessing animal welfare risk in fiber producing animals with the use of the 5 domains model. And we will then have a final discussion depending on the time which is left. Just one technical note. After each presentation, there will be 10 minutes question and answers. We invite all our participants to raise your questions. You may use the chat box. If you don't have access to a chat box, you also might use the Q&A box, but we prefer the chat box, which is at the bottom of the screen on the right. And please note that the webinar will be recorded and will be further available on the homepage of the EAAP. It will be then after 3 months public and will be available on the official EAAP YouTube channel. So this is just the introduction of our webinar, and we will now continue. Sorry. We will now continue with our first talk. I would like to introduce Christoph Winkler, who is our first speaker. I would like to give just some few notes on his background, on his scientific background. He studied veterinary medicine and animal science and specialized in veterinary physiology. Since 1997, he is working on applied animal welfare science, and he focuses on farm animals, especially in cattle. But since 2003, he has a broader background, being professor for livestock ecology at the Department for Sustainable Agricultural Science at the BOKU in Vienna. And I would like to welcome Christoph Winkler. Just please say hello to our participants.
Hello, good afternoon. So I'm going to start my presentation. Good afternoon and welcome to this first presentation in the course of this webinar, and thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I will now focus on animal welfare in extensive production systems with a special focus on the alpaca case, as I called it. And my aim is to set a bit the scene for the discussion that will be then, that we will have then, more focusing on the shearing of alpaca, but I will also address a bit the alpacas. But my aim is to have a broader view on animal welfare in extensive production systems. And first of all, I would like to say that when we talk about animal extensive production systems, then it's not a one-size-fits-all system. It's not a very uniform system, but also in these, under these extensive production conditions, we find a high variability in terms of location, in terms of altitude, just looking at the alpaca production, in terms of natural conditions, such as vegetation and climate, in terms of herd and farm size, level of contact with the animals, and so on. So we find a high variability in these systems, and therefore I can only give a very general outlook on the welfare, and I will not be able to really address all these aspects separately. And the second point I would like to make beforehand is the fact that there is a scarcity of literature on South American camelids in terms of animal welfare, especially under the Andean conditions. If you Google in the Google Scholar for animal welfare and alpacas, you find publications, but they are mostly from Europe or from Australia, and only very rarely studies have been actually done under the conditions in South America. And I think this is a lack of knowledge that we have, and there is a lot of work to be done. When talking about animal welfare, we have to understand what we are talking about, and therefore I would like to start with a few slides on the concepts of welfare, so that we have a common understanding of at least what I would consider animal welfare. And animal welfare is not a purely scientific concept, but it is also a societally driven concept. And therefore, I prefer to talk about viewpoints regarding animal welfare. Some people would use the term concepts, but it's more viewpoints regarding animal welfare. And the first viewpoint is what is mostly called the biological functioning dimension of animal welfare. And this mostly addresses the health state of the animals, whether they are able to stay healthy, whether the conditions provided allow them to stay healthy. This would also include injuries, so that they are free from injuries. The biological functioning also addresses the performance and the growth, considering that with impaired growth or impaired performance levels indicate that there is a welfare problem. Less the other way around, that a high performance level always means high welfare. And similar considerations apply also to fertility and reproductive success. So this is the first and very commonly used dimension of animal welfare. And for a long time, animal welfare science has focused mainly on the biological functioning dimension. The second dimension that is relevant to mention is the one of affective states, meaning the subjective experiences animals have in terms of feelings, emotions, and also in terms of more longer term mood states, which could be positive or negative. So on the one hand, we try to avoid suffering, for example, in terms of frustration the animals are experiencing if they are thwarted, a motivation to perform a certain behavior, for example. But also pain is a subjective experience, and this also should be avoided. In recent years, there's been also a lot of focus on the subjective experience of positive experiences. So whether the animals are actually able to have positive experiences, to be able to make such experiences. And this is, as I said, a more recent development, and the focus is in general shifting a bit from the biological functioning to the affective states nowadays, but also to the more positive side of welfare. The graph also already shows that there is an overlap. The third dimension is the dimension of naturalness. And here, this means the ability to perform the normal behavior repertoire, that the animals are able to perform the behaviors they are actually motivated to do, what they want to do. And this also refers to animals being able to make use of their natural adaptive capacities in order to cope with their environment. The graph already shows that there is overlaps between these different viewpoints or dimensions of welfare. And one example, not directly for camelids, but it can be analogously also applied to camelids, is the one of injuries. Here on the picture, you see a sole ulcer of a cow, this, on the one hand, of course, has to do with impaired biological functioning because there is a tissue damage, which would also be considered an impaired biological function. But on the other hand, such an alteration is also connected with pain and with reduced abilities to defend resources or to access resources, which may result in frustration or in aggressive interactions, for example, and it may also result in frustration. So we have an overlap, and therefore these dimensions are interconnected, and you may come up with more examples for such overlaps. When we consider animal welfare now in extensive production systems, then very much the naturalness approach needs to be considered, because biological functioning and feelings can also be interpreted as adaptive responses to the natural environment. And so the conditions provided in these extensive conditions, in the best case, will lead to a highly adaptive situation in the animals, that they're able to adapt to these situations, that they're not suffering from diseases, and they're not suffering from injuries. And at the same time, the provision of behavioral opportunities may also lead to positive affective states, if you think, for example, of play behavior. But you can also at the same time think of impaired welfare in terms of contracting diseases under certain extensive conditions, or of experiencing negative affective states. And this is what we actually have to take into account when talking about welfare in these extensive production systems. There are, as I already said, on the one hand, positive aspects, a lot of positive aspects of these extensive production systems, and they mostly relate to this naturalness aspect in terms of behavioral freedom for the animals, which are linked to, or which can be linked to, welfare benefits. They are usually not restricted in movement. They're able to express their normal behavior repertoire, and also able to express especially the behaviors that they are motivated to actually perform. And this could, for example, relate also to a free choice of social partners, or at the same time also the ability to maintain social distances. And this is a big difference to intensive housing conditions and intensive, as we have them for other farm animal species, where there is a lot of crowding or even overcrowding, overstocking going on, where we have a lot of restriction of movement under highly confined housing conditions, and which often affects social behavior, which affects locomotory behavior, which affects play behavior, if you think more of young animals, or which also affects the expression of comfort behavior or even of sexual behavior. However, the important point here is that the extensive environment where under these extensive production conditions needs to provide for the behavioral needs. This has been questioned, for example, for the extensively kept sheep in Europe, for example, in Scotland, whether all the extensive pasture conditions actually provide for the needs of the animals. However, in the case of alpaca, since the conditions the animals are kept in are very similar to the conditions where they have evolved in, I would personally consider this as given in many cases, so that the environmental conditions very much provide for the behavioral needs of the animals in general, at least. This is the positive side of these extensive conditions. However, there are also, as in many cases, also downsides of this, that behavioral freedom also comes or may come with welfare costs. And this behavioral freedom under these free range conditions or very extensive remote conditions depends very much on the provision of food, water, thermal and physical comfort, which is affected by climatic variability and also unpredictability. And furthermore, under these conditions, inspection may be infrequent, so the contact of stock persons maybe much less or in most cases is much less frequent than under intensive housing conditions. And this, on the one hand, means that the animals are less used to being herded or less to be in contact with humans. And on the other hand, that if there is disease or injury, it may be untreated or it may even be undetected. Of course, this depends very much on the level of contact that is provided to the animals. I would now like to focus on two aspects. One is the one on food, and the other one is the one on thermal comfort. And then lastly, I will focus on the interactions. So in terms of provision of food, South American camelids and including alpacas may experience scarce feed resources during especially the dry period, during the European summer months, with a risk of protein and energy deficiency. This has been described, and since they're often not feed supplemented, this may result in a loss of body condition and on end of body weight. It is debated whether food deprivation is experienced as hunger when animals can express foraging behavior. So still the animals under these scarce feed conditions are able to show foraging behavior, and they may still be able to ingest feed, maybe in limited amounts. But when they can express this foraging behavior, it may, hunger may develop less. So at least this has been suggested. However, when there is a pronounced loss in body weight and body condition, this is most likely to be linked with impaired welfare, and this needs to be taken into account. Furthermore, in sheep, it has been shown that maternal undernutrition causes distress in the youth and also then in the offspring. However, there is no data on such effects in alpacas. In terms of thermal stress, it is known, and Martina Gerken has provided a very nice review on the thermoregulatory abilities of South American camelids, that they're able to adapt to a broad range of climatic conditions. And this is due to morphological adaptation mechanisms in terms of thermal windows with a different code, differently structured code, which allows the heat dissipation if necessary, but also behavioral adaptation mechanisms, which then reduce the heat loss under cool or cold conditions. And in general, we can say that South American camelids are particularly suited for cooler environmental conditions, which is the situation they are usually kept in the South American countries. It is more a problem for South American camelids kept under different climatic conditions like in Europe or in Australia, where heat stress plays much more a role, but this is not so relevant under the South American conditions. However, what we have to take into account is that shearing may affect the protective layer of the hair. This potentially leads to cold stress, but this can be mitigated by a certain shearing strategy in terms of when shearing is done, and also how long the remaining fleece is. The last point considers the animal-human relationship. There is a high variability, as I already said, in frequency and type of contact, ranging from depending on whether the animals are herded, whether they are only on pasture during the day and brought back to confined conditions during the night, or whether they are roaming for longer periods of time without human contact on pasture. However, the interactions are often not at close quarters, so they are not very direct, not many direct interactions, and the handling is often perceived aversive. This has been described in several studies. And of course, this depends on the labor availability. So the number of contacts depends on the labor availability, but the effects on the animals also depend on the quality of the interactions. And this is especially important for our today's topic, which is shearing. It has been shown that shearing is a stressful event due to the separation from the herd, due to the catching, the fixation, that is done on the animals, and the shearing process as such, which can also differ in how it is carried out. And it is well known that female alpaca may react to shearing, pregnant female alpaca may react to abortion or premature birth, also indicating that this is highly stressful event for the animals. And also looking at the closer reactions of the animals, stress reactions of the animals in terms of behavioral and physiological responses, there is nowadays quite a lot of evidence that the animals are subjected to a stress. This has been, on the one hand, carried out under Andean conditions, but also in Europe, where there is also an increased public awareness of this shearing procedure done on the alpacas. A more recent study of one of my master students that has been co-supervised by Alan Cruz and Maria Wurzinger also. She also looked at the behavior of the alpacas that were subjected to shearing or to a sham shearing, so that were only fixated. And what you can see here on the graph is the scream duration in % of the observation time. Screaming is a behavioral measure of distress in alpacas. And for the different periods of the whole shearing procedure, which were divided into a pre-period, then the start of the shearing when the animal had been fixated on the floor, until the mid point when the animal was turned, and then the end, and already afterwards. And in the actually shorn animals, you can see an increase in the screaming activity, but also in the sham animals, there's a certain level of screaming. They are not silent. So they're also the fixation as such is obviously experienced as stressful. And a number of physiological studies have also been done, and I just picked out one showing an increase in eye temperature, which can be explained as an increased sympathetic activity, showed that compared to the situation before, there is an increase during shearing, and then after shearing, it goes back. And this is a study that was done under real farming conditions in Peru by Alan Cruz. Now, what are the ways forward? And I'm sure we are going to discuss this more in detail later on. Restraint can be improved, and the shearing methods as such may also be improved. We can aim for an improved animal-human and human-animal relationship, making the interactions less stressful. And Ines Windschnurer here in Austria, under European conditions, could show that there is a sequential relationship between caretaker attitudes, or that there are indications for such a relationship between caretaker attitudes, amount of gentle contact with the animals, and the animal's behavior as in other species as well. And so, so there is obviously an opportunity to improve the human-animal relationship, which would make this shearing procedure less stressful for the animals. And such pictures show that there can be quite a close relationship with the animals. And this one that has been kindly provided by Maria today also, I think, clearly indicates that there can be a quite close relationship between stock persons or farmers and the animals. To conclude, I think what we should be concerned, especially with all farmed animals, but also especially with those under these extensive production conditions, is that we do not only look at a very isolated event like the shearing, but that we should have a more closer look at the overall quality of life of the animals under such production conditions. And quality of life means that it is more than not suffering. It should aim at a good life as it is depicted here in the green area of this graph. Not just a life worth living, but really aiming at a good life. And if you want to show this in a different way, what makes a good life is that the really bad experiences, as they have been shown here under the red line on the graph on the right side, they should actually be avoided. So the animals should never go under a certain level of impaired welfare. And this may be a poor shearing procedure they are experiencing. So we should aim at avoiding at least these conditions. And at the same time, we should try to allow them to experience as many as possible really positive subjective experiences, and extensive conditions, as I explained before, have the potential to provide such positive experiences. And with this, I would like to close my presentation, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Christoph, for this very nice talk. The presentation is open for discussion. As I explained before, please use the chat box for the questions you might like to pose. And I don't see at the moment any questions, but nevertheless, I think participants will have questions. And I would like to start with my question first to you, Christoph. Mm-hmm. You showed a picture with the poor alpaca fixed on all four legs. Yeah. Can you show it again? Yeah. Is this really necessary?
Well, I didn't want to go into details in the different restraint methods, but there have been comparisons between different restraint methods, comparing the fixating the animals, restraining it on the floor as it can be seen here, or comparing it with fixating it in the same way but on an elevated table, which would also ease the labor for the workers, and comparing it with shearing the animals in a standing position. And in general, although the differences were not in all the measures really pronounced, it seems that the standing position is much less stressful than the fixation and the restraining the animals with all four legs. However, some of the animals in this experimental setup could not be shorn when they were standing, because they showed really, so a small number of animals showed quite strong aversive reactions. So the conclusions of the authors was that it should be preferred, but for those animals that it should be preferred to do it in a standing position, but for those animals that show these strong aversive reactions, that then an alternative should be provided, which is then more restricted.
Yes, this agrees with our experiences. I think it is very important, as you said, to have a good attitude during the shearing, and we were very lucky that we found a person who was able to shear our llamas, which were very wild, standing, and no restriction at all. It was very easy. I've now received a question from Luis Antonio Huitron Ramirez, and he asked, how can we improve the communication with the workers? Because he has the idea that sometimes many of them are reluctant to cooperate or to change their habits.
Yeah, this is not a South American problem, or it's not a Peruvian problem. This is, I think, a global issue, so that it is changing behavior and changing attitudes is a difficult task. But I have to admit that I'm not an expert in it. But there have been training programs, for example, carried out in Australia, showing that with a targeted program, with an education program, and really targeting attitudes of the workers, it has been shown to be successful in improving the human-animal relationship. So by explaining to the workers what the effects of the handling is on the animals, how they react, and also, of course, providing alternatives, so showing to the workers how they might do it in a different way and how they can then improve the situation. But I agree, it is a difficult task, and it is, I think, a matter of small steps, but we have to start somewhere. But as I said, this is the same. We have a lot of discussion going on about the handling of animals in slaughterhouses in Europe. And also there, it's often quoted that it's very hard to educate the workers and so on, but we have to start somewhere, and we should make use of such really structured learning programs, teaching programs.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that's probably the only way. And as you said, to put scientific evidence to explain how this stressful situation can be relieved for the animal is, I think, a very important step. Yeah. And I think it is also important to show the persons who are working with the animals that animal welfare is not a luxury, but it can also be beneficial for the producer or the shearer himself or herself.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay. Just a remark to the general audience. Questions can be asked in many questions, languages. So, wenn Sie nicht gerne Englisch fragen wollen, fragen Sie bitte auf Deutsch in der Chatbox. Ich kann übersetzen. Si quiere preguntar en castellano, por favor, ponga su pregunta en castellano en la cajita chat. So we hope we will have more questions for the next talk. So we are perfectly in time, Christoph. I thank you very much. Could you then please close your window, and we will continue with our next talk. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We will continue. Sorry. Now we will go to Peru. We are very pleased to have our next speaker, Alonso Burgos. And again, I will try to put it small again. Yes. Alonso, before you start, could you just please say hello to the general audience, please? Alonso?
Good morning, good afternoon with everybody. It's a morning here in Peru.
So we heard it's about 8 o'clock, very early in the morning, and I would like just to introduce yourself. Some notes. You studied political science and economics in Iowa in the United States, but you then returned to Peru, and for more than 35 years you're working on alpaca matters, and at the moment you are working at Pacobarca, which is an experimental station for scientific studies and genetic improvement of alpacas, and you're closely linked to the enterprise Incatops, which is one of the, I think, famous textile industry in Peru. And we are very pleased that you will talk to us. So please, the presentation on the, alpaca shearing as a way of sustainability. Please.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I go right away to the topic. First of all, this is a point of view of the textile industry. This is not exactly a scientific point of view. We have done some studies on that matter as well, which we will be happy to share with you in another occasion. At this time, we're going to view basically from the economic and industry point of view. The very first thing is that the concept of sustainability for us. For us, the sustainability of the alpaca has to do basically with the people. Even though we're very much aware of the needs of the animals and the welfare of the animals, we're much more interested in the needs and the welfare of the keepers, of the people, of the herders here in Peru. In our concept for sustainability is that as long as there is an economic incentive for people to breed alpacas, they will keep on breeding them in the best possible way. But if that economic incentive is gone, or if it's too low, then I'm afraid that the population of alpacas will decrease, and we will no longer be able to enjoy this beautiful resource that nature has given us, this animal. Let's start with the basics, the environment, and Christoph has spoken a bit about the environment, so I will be able to go fast on this.
Alonso, sorry, can you please put it on a different presentation mode? We only see very small picture.
Aha. Now, this is going to be hard because I have done
presentation
exactly the same way as we have done it yesterday. So
yes.
How can I do this?
Can you try to stop share and then try to share?
Okay. I will share it back again. How about now?
No, it's the same.
This is exactly how we did it yesterday.
No,
okay.
it's better.
Now, yeah.
It's better? Okay.
It's better. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. And so the areas where alpacas are bred in Peru are very, very big. Probably as big as the whole of Spain put together, with the difference that there are huge altitudes in between, no roads, no communication, and very, very harsh weather. As I was saying, Christoph has mentioned about the territory where alpacas have been living forever, very, very harsh territory. I don't know if you're able to see this, but these are the Mollepunku caves, very close to where I live in southern Peru. And this particular picture shows this animal, which is probably a very, very primitive alpaca. These caves are dated around 6,000 years ago, and there is a link between this human figure and the animal. And this link goes to the neck of the animal. This just shows you one thing. These are probably the very, very first picture of domestication of alpacas in Peru. So 6,000 years ago, these animals were populating these areas, and 6,000 years after we came into the picture. And this is Pacamarca, our scientific station, located in the very, very heart of the territory where we moved after being at the foothills of a volcano, which erupted and had us flee away on a hurry. Anyhow, as Christoph was showing, the territory being as harsh as it is provides very little food for the animals. Therefore, there are always scarcity of resources in terms of food for the animals. Now, let's talk a little bit about the population. Nobody knows really how many alpacas are in Peru. We guess at the textile industry that there are about 5 million thereabouts. But the important thing is the distribution of these animals. Unfortunately, this is in Spanish, but I can explain to you that most of the alpacas are held by people in very, very small units. For example, from 1 to 200 alpacas, there are about 7,000 family units or breeders that own between 100 and 200 alpacas. Between 200 and 500, there's even smaller group, 2,800. And more than 500, there's only about 270, 275 breeders. We always talk about having 50,000 families or breeders. Well, imagine this, the distribution of the animal is scattered in a very, very, very small family units. And that is the start of the problem with the shearing, with sustainability, with improving anything in the alpaca world in Peru, which, by the way, holds the majority of the animals in the world. The conditions of the people that live are quite extreme. No electricity, water, communication, education, or social, basically survival of the fittest in an immense territory again. But these people have been living in this way for thousands and thousands of years. So just as the animals have been there for a long time, they as well have been there. But that's not to say that the quality of life for them is a good one. It is not. It's extremely poor, and especially in terms of the housing. As you can see in this picture, that's the whole household on the back. It's just stones and a thatch roof. In these conditions, animals are kept and animals are shorn. And the traditional way of shearing an animal is between the couple, as you can see in the picture. The animals are tied with both legs. Usually the lady holds the head. The guy starts shearing with a pair of scissors. And I want to point out this, all the leggings of all of the fiber that have come at the last with the leggings, which is the coarser fiber, the fiber that has the more guard hair. It's picked up after the shearing, and then it's placed on the fleece, on the finer part of the fleece. And this is the single most painful thing to see when it comes to shearing alpacas, in terms of the yields that can be obtained, in terms of making the fiber less valuable. Why? Because this coarse fiber will ruin the fine fiber underneath, and therefore will not enable us to make finer textiles in this way. Afterwards, the whole fleece is very tight put together, and therefore the coarser fibers cannot be separated from the fiber. We started working at Pacomarca about 20 years ago, thinking about how could we improve the shearing techniques. And the very first thing we did was a map of the alpaca in terms of fineness. And obviously we came to this picture. The finer parts of the alpaca are in the center of the back, and the coarser one starts going towards the leg. And that's why we started thinking in the system to shear animals, which we call Inca esquila, Inca shearing. And we started experimenting that about, as I said, 22 years ago, and found out that this system was much more productive than the traditional system in many ways, because the females, for example, were suffering much less from abortions just because of the use of the nets here, and it would take much less time to shear an animal. An animal wouldn't suffer too many cuts because it was well strained. And so we started sharing this new system with the traditional alpaca breeders. And this, believe me, has been a very, very hard task, because breeders come from a very traditional background. So to see this very new thing was something so new for them, and it took a long time for them to understand, and to understand also things like taking care of other things while you were shearing, for example, cutting toenails, and just general welfare of the animal. We at Pacomarca use protection after the shearing, especially for the weak animals, and for a few days after we cut the hair. Obviously, we do this during the summer months when the temperature is much hotter, and so we tried that the animals suffer the least. After that, we started with school training, with training on the new shearing method. And for that, we pair both with the government and some NGOs, and we have actually been able to give the very first technical diploma for shearers. And by the way, our shearing methods became the national technical norm for alpaca shearing in Peru ever since the year 2014. So we're proud of having been a part of this technical norm. But the important thing was to convince the breeders, the alpaca breeders, that this system could work, and that the shearing with a mechanical shearing, electrical shears, was not going to kill the animal or was not going to cause any further harm. And for that, we had to go to public plazas and fairs and to give workshops in the Andes for many, many years. But believe me, the basic convincing tool for breeders to use the new method has always been money terms. If we were able to pay better prices for this new shearing technique, that was the most convincing thing of all. And for that, we started our shearing service. We had a small truck with the electrical generators and with the shearing machines ready to be installed anywhere. And we started providing the shearing services, even though it was hailing and snowing. We did provide the shearing service and paid more for the fleece. We also had events that would enthusiast the breeders, and we had a contest for the breeders. They would participate with the finest fleece, and the fleece had to be shorn in the new method. And the prize for this was a whole new house. And when we showed the method to breeders in these events, and finally the winner got a new house with a running bathroom and heating system and electricity and a greenhouse, which was a very, very good improvement from what you saw at the beginning. And this has proven to be a very, very good tool to get breeders to go for the new system. It even had a greenhouse so that they can have the greens after the shearing. Well, quickly, you all know about the qualities, the commercial qualities of alpaca, which start broil with 19.5 and then can go to coarse on the prices for alpaca. They vary very, very, very much throughout the years. Right now, the superfine is about 21, very close to baby, but sometimes it's very far away. And this shows you how the years since 1981, prices for alpaca baby, which is the pink, have gone up and down like a roller coaster, because as soon as the prices go up too much, then the alpaca is replaced by another fiber, and then it goes down again, and the cycle goes back and forth at that time. In the color terms, basically, it's white in the light X, and on the other colors, the browns and the fawns and the black, the percentages are very, very small. So it's mainly the white. Now, when comparing the new method of shearing with the traditional method, and this is a very, very plain, actually bad quality animal, we were able to see that you could obtain at least twice the amount of baby with the new technical system. And you can see it here on the baby, on the fleece, on the superfine, all on the fine qualities, where the new method prove to be much more productive. But if on top of that, you put a good animal besides the normal type of animal, you can here see what the yields are. The difference are humongous. They're incredible when using the proper shearing methods. In the Royal and Baby, we're able to get close to 60 nowadays to 24, which is a good improvement on the national herd, but not good enough. Prices again, and then we go all to the sorting. All the fleeces that are taken out of the animals must go through the sorting. And in the sorting, if the fleeces have been properly shorn, then you can advance more rapidly and therefore save a lot of money. And this is just an exercise we did with the yields and to prove our point. We compared a small herd of a real keeper with 578 animals. They only yield as an average 1.9 kilos against the 2.7 from us. And obviously there's a difference between the yields. And when you put money to these numbers on a single year, we can earn over 260% more than a normal breeder. But if you put on top of that the improvement that we have made throughout the years, and you put the fertility rates and the mortality rates into the picture, in a 5-year time, we could go over 600% more of income if this would be done properly. We have done our best effort, but unfortunately it's still small because we're a private company. There's very little that we can expect from our government, unfortunately. But still, we started with 0.3 in regards to the traceable alpaca. And traceable basically meant alpacas that had been properly shorn. And nowadays we're close to 12% in this year, but still very little. And never forget that alpacas comprise only a very, very small portion of the textile that are used in the world. It's less than 1% for all the animal fibers, and alpaca comprise a very small part of this, less than 1%. So whatever we can do to improve the lives of the people and that keep the animals and the conditions that the animals are shared depends on really the economic return, and that's our main goal. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, Alonso, thank you so much for this very nice and interesting talk. I see we already have received a question in Spanish. I will try to translate it. The question is whether Pacomarca has also publications, scientific publications available, and if you work with academic institutions. And the second question from the same participant is how much time do you have the experience does it take to change the attitude of the workers? That means you have shown that there is a training, and how much, according to your experience, does it take to have a changed attitude in the workers?
Yeah, regarding the first question, yes, we do have quite a few scientific publications. Pacomarca is basically an experimental scientific station, and you can find all of our publications at our webpage, www.pacomarca.com. And we do work with several universities, especially the Complutense University in Spain, with Dr. Juan Pablo Gutierrez, and the National University La Molina in Peru. And we've done several cooperations with Maria, with Boca University in Austria, and several others. So we're very well connected with the scientific world. Towards the second question, you see, it all depends on economic incentive. If the economic incentive is high enough, the change in the whole system could be very, very fast. Unfortunately, there is a lot of, what should we say, imperfections in the market when it comes to alpaca fleece. In a third world country like Peru, there's very little control by the government or the fiscal authorities or anything like that. So there's a lot of informality in the economy that runs around the alpaca business, and that unfortunately makes a distortion on how much the textile industry can really improve in terms of the economic incentives. But having said that, yes, we have seen a change already in the not only in the attitudes, but also in the national yield that we're getting from the alpaca. It's improving quite fastly. I would say the amount of finer fleeces, finer fiber we have been able to obtain in the last 20 years have tripled, 300% better.
Yes, that's impressive. This agrees with the next question I've received. You said there is an increase in income. Was this due to the wool sorting itself, or was it caused by nutrition improvement or by genetic improvement program? What do you think is the most important effect?
It's definitely a combination of all. It's a combination of of us in the Inca group specifically, that started paying more for finer fiber about 20 years ago than for coarser fiber. There's also a matter of the technical norms by the government, the improving in shearing, improving in sorting. So it's a combination of all the matters that have been able to improve the overall quality of alpaca in the last 20 years. And with that, the income of the whole industry, by industry I mean the highlands, has definitely improved as well. Not to the levels that we would love to see, obviously, but improved nevertheless.
Yes, that was really impressive. When I look carefully at your pictures and taking into consideration what Christoph Winkler explained to us before in his talk, I saw that the animals are very shorn to the skin. That means there is nearly nothing left on the skin, or was this just a special picture?
Well, we actually, it's a very good question, because when we started with the mechanical shearing experiments that many years ago, and yes, we found that the shearing machines were leaving very little hair on the animals. We never had a single animal having problems or dying from cold in our own farm in Pacomarca. But when we went to the breeders, to the outside breeders, to try to convince them to use this new method, that was the very first concern that they had. Well, my animals are going to die if the machine leaves this little hair. And so we searched and searched and searched for a type of comb, we call it comb, on the shearing machine, that would leave more hair in the animal. And after a few years of looking in the market, well, guess where we found the proper combs? Obviously in China. And we started using the Chinese combs, which leave more than 1.5 centimeters hair in the animals. And we have had zero, none, absolutely no problem with any animal of ours or of the many thousands that we have sheared for other people after the shearing procedure. So the answer is no, it doesn't hurt the animal.
Yes, but I think this was a very good comment that with a special shearing comb, this is also used in Europe to leave more residual fiber and not to shear to the skin as it is used in sheep in Australia, for instance. I'm just looking at the box. Do we have any further questions? Oh, there is another one. Oh, yes. Do you have any research on behavior or welfare or interest? Sorry, the question is, does Pacomarca is open to develop behavior or welfare research with academic institutions?
Yes, definitely. We, as I said before, we have a cooperation with several universities, both in Peru and outside of Peru in Europe. Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. We will come back to this aspect later, because I have here another question which refers still to the previous one when we talked about the different effects, whether it is the sorting or the nutrition which makes the improvement. So the question is, so your increase in fiber value is due to separating fine fiber of the back away from coarse fiber of the legs. Do you think this is the main effect for the improvement of income?
Well, the main effect is definitely that one, obviously, trying to separate by this new shearing method the possibility of mixing up the coarse hairs with the finer hairs. But there are other benefits, especially for the breeders. And for one thing, they obtain more material, because when you shear with the scissors, or sometimes even with a piece of glass or tin cans, as it happens sometimes in the highlands, there's a lot of fiber that's left in the animal. And with method, you recover a lot more fiber. There's also an improvement on the cost, because nowadays the cost of hiring shearers for the elderly keepers remind that the keepers, the alpaca keepers, are aging rapidly in Peru, and they have to hire extra help for shearing. We as Inca Group, as Incatops, we provide the shearing free of charge for the breeders that accept the new method. So that's also a huge improvement on the income for the breeders. So there are several ways in which the new shearing method improves the income of the alpaca breeder.
Yes, just a technical question. How long does it take on average to have a traditional shearing, as you shown before, and a shearing according to the Incatop method?
I don't have the exact minutes, because we have done these experiments many years ago, but out of my head, it would have been like 8 to 9 minutes in the traditional against 3 or 4 in the mechanical.
Yes, I think this is a very important thing, because as Christoph pointed out, the fixation is very stressful for the animal, so the shorter, the better, apparently. So an improved shearing method will also improve possibly welfare for the animal, as I understand.
Yeah, this is the topic of a paper that we have already published the first part of it. We're still working on it with the aid of Juan Pablo and the university, the Complutense University. We're able to do an experiment of the level of stress that the animals have during the shearing, and this was taken with thermal temperature taken to show the level of stress. And even though the stress was pretty much the same, both in the hand shearing and the mechanical shearing, the mechanical was a lot shorter, which that on its own improves the matter for the animal, right?
Okay. Here we are again. I hope you have refreshed yourself during the short coffee break. We are going now to continue with the next talk. Marlene Kirchner will talk to us about assessing animal welfare risk in fiber-producing animals with the use of the 5 domains model. And before I will ask Marlene just to say hello to the participants, to the audience, and then I would like to introduce you to the participants, please.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for the kind introduction.
Put on your microphone, please.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay? No?
Yes, yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now
okay.
it's better? Yes, okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation and the introduction.
Yes. Now I would like to give just some more information about our next speaker. FORPAWS has been established in 1988. It's a global animal welfare organization for animals under direct human influence. It sounds a little bit complicated, but that means these are not only animals, pet animals or farm animals, but also animals which live in zoos or zoological gardens and which are under direct human influence. She is expert in farm animals and nutrition for this organization, and her focus is the assessment of animal welfare on farm and group level, and we are very pleased that you followed the invitation, and we would like now to know what 5 domains mean, because I think this term is not known to all of our participants. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just a second, I need to share my screen.
Marlene, you're muted.
Sorry, your microphone is off.
I will stop. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
okay.
Perfect.
Sorry. Once again, can you see the presentation now?
No.
Okay. Forgive me, please. Yesterday it worked.
That's always the technical problem. Don't worry. Take your time.
Okay. Second go. Now it should work. And you should be able to hear me.
Yes.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks for your patience. Yes, as you heard, we are active worldwide as an animal welfare organization. Especially there is a connection from the beginning, 1988, when 4PAW started until to date with textiles and engagement for the animals that are used for various type of textiles. We started as a no-fur movement, and throughout the years, 4PAW was successfully cooperating with the textile industry to improve gradually the lives of animals that are producing the fibers for the industry. We are also cooperating with international agencies like the UN departments, the OIE, and also the OECD in due diligence in the supply chain. And we have a brand engagement team sitting in Australia. My colleague Jess Metcalf is happy in helping brands to improve their animal welfare policies and also their strategies in ending cruelty in animals in their textile supply chain. So 4PAW has a strong animal ethical background, as you would imagine. And on the other hand, we also promote the one welfare concept, which involves humans and animals to benefit from a kind treatment of animals. And this is also in the context to prevent future pandemics. However, as an animal welfare NGO, it's very clear that we demand good welfare states for all species under the direct human influence. But what is a good welfare state for us? As Christoph, I would like to just make a short statement about how we define it so that we know what we are talking about. And here we are already with the 5 domains. This is an ethical framework developed by Professor Meller and colleagues and updated in the recent years. It shows here that mental state is a very central aspect of the definition. So how the animal perceives its world, and physical and mental state of the animal is important. And if you look at provisions like nutrition, physical environment, health, and the behavioral interactions that animals have, that would reflect all on the mental state that the animal experiences. So based on this, we are working with welfare assessments for farm animals, in my case, but we also have one for our bears in the sanctuaries that we run. And here we stick to what Christoph already said in the beginning. We are using animal-based parameters because we think this is the closest possible way to assess animal welfare on the animal. And we have these viewpoints, as Christoph called it. We involve the naturalistics, functioning, and mental state viewpoints. And therefore, our welfare assessments are very comprehensive. This means we are using not a single indicator, for example, thermography or cortisol measurements, but we're using a whole range of indicators to assess animal welfare, and that could easily be 30 or more indicators. Assessing welfare states, in the end, it can range from a good or very good or excellent welfare state to a very poor welfare state on an open scale. And as Christoph already mentioned, the expectations towards good welfare states are influenced by the society. And that means what is acceptable from the society here on the scale for the animals that are kept is largely influenced by demographics and where on the globe you would ask people. So whether they would think neutral welfare state is good enough for textile production, or if they would demand no, actually we would demand if animals are used, then we want good welfare states. That depends on social aspects and where the society sits that you're asking. I won't go into detail, but I'm happy to share my slides afterwards. So these are the materials that we're using to generate our welfare assessment protocols and what we are using. And just to warm up a little bit, and that you can do something and not only listen, you can use the chat function, and you can see the animal here with the big arrow. So if you want to assess the welfare state of this animal, which indicators would you come up with? What would you use? Would you look at the natural environment or semi-natural environment? Would you look on the physical appearance of the animal, or would you try to judge the mental state of the animal or any other indicators? Just type them in the chat. I will look at them after, and we can need them then later in the presentation. Yeah, so with all these welfare assessment basics, we wanted to start off, and we wanted to have a project where we could inform brands and companies in the textile industry of which animals have a good welfare state in their production systems and where could be areas for improvement, which is going well. However, then Corona happened, and we couldn't go, for example, to China to look into cashmere goats, or to South Africa to look into mohair production, or see some alpacas. So we had to shift our aim from welfare assessment directly on the animal to a certification review, which meant that we had to do a risk assessment and to know how the animals are kept in the production systems. We looked at the certifications, textile certifications that are already around, and what is a keeping standard and what is asked from these standards. And then normally we developed the project against the 5 domains models, and we used an aggregation method that is well known and established from the welfare quality assessment protocols. Our aim was to find out how well these textile standard requirements hold against the 5 domains of animal well-being, and if they are able to make a complex view on animal welfare, or if they are maybe not looking so much into detail. Just a quick reminder, these are all the provisions of the 5 domains where we used it as a framework and then went more into detail. And we wanted to have a proxy for the mental state of the animals there. So in practice, if we pick out just the appropriate behavioral interactions, our welfare targets would be to minimize threats and unpleasant restrictions on behavior and movement. That's also what Christoph said in the beginning with the alpaca husbandry in general. It's not so common that they are so restricted, except with the shearing procedure. However, the welfare is not only about minimizing unpleasant experience, but also to promote positive welfare. And here you can also see that in the provisions that we were looking if conspecific company is mandatory, if human interactions are adapted to the individual needs, and so forth. If there's mother bonded rearing, mandatory, if animals are kept in social groups, and if play behavior is promoted by the standards. So then we took our standard inputs and regulations. We had decision trees that were expert derived to arrive on provision level, and had a mathematical procedure to arrive on the domain level. And finally, we could tell for each and every standard which risk for the mental state of the animal would appear. So these would be the results. So it would look like this graph. On the very outside, you would have all the ingoing factors that we could read out of the standard that would be mandatory to provide for the animals. And then in the more inner circles, you would see the aggregated scores. If you remember back that the red areas would be a risk for very poor animal welfare, and the more green it gets, the lower the risk is for poor welfare. So here you can see, for example, the standard has something in place to handle injuries or to manage injuries or prevent injuries, and has a lameness management in place and regular injury checks. Yeah, so our take home from the project was that it was a very good exercise and that it can be applied to all husbandry systems that we want to look into. Not only the ones that have already a certificate like the Responsible Wool Standard or Responsible Alpaca Standard or others, ZQ Merino. But in future, of course, we are aiming to do real welfare assessments on farm for several fibers. However, we will use this in our brand engagement team, and companies that want consultancy, we can of course share this and work with them with this project. Now a little bit more into detail for shearing. As we heard already that this is, if you take this as the quality of life, and you see in the top the positive welfare experiences that need to be plenty to level out the negative experiences, then the question is, of course, where is shearing? And if you look at it with the 5 domain point of view, then of course, if you look at this picture now, and you now think of your indicators and what is the welfare state here, then very often we have the impression that here is about fight, flight, or freeze in the animals, and not so much about pleasant welfare experiences. What you can use out of the 5 domains are these examples that we collected here, so that you try to look at these indicators, if at least you can keep those stable. You cannot avoid shearing if you want to have wool from alpacas, but what you can do is that you do the best to ensure that positive experiences are possible as well, and that you stabilize things or make it easier for the animals, the separation anxiety, the human-animal relationship, the handling, and then also a lot of technical aspects with the shearing itself. A lot of animals have stress with the noise of the clippers, so habituation could be a possibility to reduce the stress experience. But yeah, always keep in mind that this mental experience has a big impact on the emotional state of the animal, not only during the 4 minutes of shearing and the 20 minutes of handling, but also after the event. Yeah, and with this, I would thank you for your attention. We have, as I said, a lot of materials that we are happy to share if someone is interested. And yeah, and other than that, I'm very happy to take your questions at the moment.
Okay, so Marlene, thank you very much for this nice talk. It is open to questions, as you said. I'm just looking at the chat box at the moment. People still have to reflect your talk. So I would like to start with my question. Do you think that you are comfortable with the responsible wool standard to use this also for South American camelids? Can you transfer your experience from this standard to the alpaca standard?
Well, they are two completely different standards. I mean, because how to say, one was made for sheep, responsible wool standard, and has grown from the mainly Australian environment and society. And I think there have been some efforts done to for the alpaca responsible standard to work also with local communities in South Americas. I think that the Australian the responsible wool standard is one of the most developed standards and certificates that we have. That is also has a lot of time in practice and had a lot of iterations of feedback, training, and so on. And also recent discussion, of course, about mulesing. So I think, to answer your question, I think the direct transfer to say, yes, this is good and this is also good, is not so easy. However, I think in a few months of time, we will also be able to publish our results in detail and also write a scientific paper about it. And then, yeah, and then you can look at the hard facts, also how the standards compare to each other in terms of risk assessment for welfare.
Yes, thank you. I've now received a question. It says, have you worked with low stress handling techniques? Are these suitable for these species? And in brackets, sheep, alpaca, and goat.
Okay. Yeah, we ourselves do not work on in production systems. We go mainly there to assess welfare animal welfare. However, I know from our colleague Susanne Weiblinger that she worked successfully in this technique, and from my point of view, it would definitely be worth trying. With early handling, also from the cria. Also, I know this is in some areas a taboo to handle the early or the very young animals. However, what is important and crucial is that you do not interact always with the animals in a for them negative way, but that you promote a good human-animal relationship, and that these animals get positive experiences with humans before the event of shearing, because it's obviously very stressful for them. So better they have positive experiences beforehand.
Yes, thank you. I've another comment and question. It says, very interesting, with good ideas to improve the welfare of the alpaca during shearing. And now the question, how much can these practices affect the economy of the farm? For example, 20 minutes of interaction with each alpaca to be sheared may be unfeasible on a farm with 2,000 animals. What is your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, as an animal welfare organization, for us, it's clearly important that the animals are handled with care and treated with respect. So if this is a one-year event, or in other animals, mohair, for example, it might be shown twice a year. And it takes only 3 to 4 minutes. So we think it's justifiable that this time is spent, even if it's taking a little bit longer. It's not a weekly procedure, but it's definitely very crucial and important for the animals, and also for the acceptance of the customers. And finally, this has a very big economic effect then for the farm, because if it's not accepted by the consumers or the people that want to buy something made of alpaca, then there will be absolutely no economic response then, or success.
Yes, I think that's a very clear answer. However, do you think, just to come back to this question, how could you imagine to work with such a large number of animals in this way? Could you imagine some practical solution?
I mean, there are some, if you either need more workers or less animals, or you need to kind of have different days for the shearing. I mean, there's certainly also more qualified people to answer this, because maybe Alonso has more ideas here how this could be organized. But yeah, 2,000 animals on one day is, of course, a lot of animals. and you probably need a lot of workers and hands, helping hands, to do this. That's for sure.
Yes, I think, yes, it's an important point. You mentioned the consumer, and our topic is really, are we prepared for welfare animal-friendly shearing or animal-friendly textile? What I really wonder is who is the consumer and who decides what the consumer wants? Because it's, for me, it's a very anonymous person, the consumer, and frequently I hear the consumer wants, but I always question myself, who is that very interesting consumer who is always present, but no one knows him or her?
Yeah, now we should be social scientists, and we would know more about these aspects about sociology. However, we were also interested in this topic, and I can tell you that we had some informed research going on with questionnaires to a broad public, and asking about how people perceive fashion trends, animal-based or animal-derived fibers used in textiles. And we present some of these results in our yearly fashion report. So if you're interested in this topic and you wonder what consumers want and how many % of them share for ethical or take care of ethical fashion, then you can go to the website and find the report there. But yeah, I'm sure that also other organizations do this kind of research.
Yes,
Alonso has the hand up.
Yes, there's a question. Can you put it in the chat box, Alonso? Or do you want it to put it directly?
Well, I just wanted to...
He can speak.
Yes, okay, please.
I wanted to answer from our point of view about this consumer question.
Please.
Yeah, what we have found out is that the big brands like H&M and Zara and those names, Uniqlo, they are the ones that are concerned about this matters of animal health because of their names involved in everything. But the smaller firms in the broad markets, Chinese markets, for example, they don't really care much about anything regarding animal health. That's our experience as sellers of alpaca goods. So the main concerns come from the brands, from the established brands, which are the smaller consumer of alpaca fiber. But the broad largest consumers, which are the large manufacturers, both in US, China, and Europe, they don't really have much to say in terms of animal health. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Alonso. This was very helpful. There are no more questions for Marlene, so thank you very much. And I would like to invite the three speakers for the final discussion, and also all participants to put additional questions. So I would like to start with Christoph. Christoph, your microphone. Okay, could you please? Okay, yes.
Okay.
I would like to put the question of our seminar, shearing and animal welfare demanded by consumers, but are we prepared? So what do you think from your animal welfare science experiences? What could you contribute to this question? Are we prepared? Do we have all the scientific methods and knowledge to really answer this question, whether we can offer animal-friendly textiles to the consumer?
Well, that's a big question. Thank you very much.
We have 10 minutes, sorry.
Okay. Basically, I think we are partly prepared. Let's say we are partly prepared. So we have some studies looking at the effects of different, let's say, restraint methods, shearing methods. So we have some evidence for this, which help us in improving the procedures. On the other hand, but it's very much focused on the shearing. So it's very much looking on the shearing as the central issue. And I would like to see also a broader picture. And for this, when preparing this presentation, I was astonished how little there is actually done under the practical farming conditions in terms of animal welfare. So we know very little about the behavior of these animals under these conditions. And I think we also know very little about which is a bit closer to shearing, about the general properties of human-animal interactions or animal-human interactions. So this would be worth pursuing from my point of view, to know more about the behavior, about their preferences, and also to get a better insight on how we can actually improve this interaction. I'm convinced that it can be, as it has been shown under the more European conditions, that there is a link between how the animals are treated, how they are handled, and their reaction. So there is a potential for improvement in the general handling of the animals. But we probably need more studies on this to understand it better.
Yes, yes. What do you think could be a suitable indicator? Because Marlene, she explained that they use about 30 indicators for a scientific work that might be a little bit too much in one experiment. But do you think there are certain indicators which are more promising than others?
In terms of stress reaction, you mean?
Stress during shearing, yes.
Yeah, okay. I mean, many of the indicators point in the same direction. So many of the behavioral measures, they point in the same direction. I think we could narrow it a bit down. For example, looking at these defense behaviors, these struggling movements, and the leg movement is a bit difficult to. If they are really restrained, then you cannot use the leg movements. But I think we can focus on these vocalizations and on the defense behaviors. This would be one thing. On the physiological side, I'm less convinced that we find the one measure, because the evidence that we have so far is quite contradictory. So it's not really pointing in the same direction. There are sometimes we find this indication of increased sympathetic activity, in other cases not. And what we also find is this huge variability. It's also there in the behavioral reactions, but at least there it's more a matter of the size of the effect. But for the physiological measures, we often see differentially directed effects. So some animals react like they would get calmer during the procedures, and others seem to be more excited, more stressed. So there we need definitely more work into these indicators. And this was actually the aim of this master's thesis, where I just presented the behavioral measure of screaming. And also my master's student did not find a clear picture that can be easily interpreted. So this is something where we need more work, definitely.
Yes, thank you. I've now received quite a comment. I think it's a comment which could go to Alonso Burgos. Alonso, do you hear me? Alonso?
Yes,
okay.
Loud and clear.
We have had the question how to improve on-farm the animal welfare under Peruvian conditions, and that it might be difficult with 2,000 animals to have procedures to improve human-animal contact. And this is the comment which I have received. Thank you. For big farms might mean they need for workers. However, as I heard from Peru, that also many small holders are involved in wool growing, so they might have an advantage in logistics and in building a positive animal-human relationship. That means cooperation probably between farmers. What do you think about this perspective?
I'm not sure if I understood the question properly, but from what I understand is if it's easier to improve animal conditions on a larger farm or in a smaller one. Is that the case?
Yes, that could be.
Yeah, well, the answer is very clear. It's much easier on a larger scale because they are more connected with the outside world, with the Western thinking society, communications and everything. The smaller the unit, the more further away the keepers are from the Western thoughts and industrialization and communications and everything. So they become more and more natural breeders. Having said that, please remember, everybody, that these animals have been with us here in Peru, with Peruvians, for over 6,000 years. And they're still there. They're still thriving. And some of them are not as well fed as we would like to see, but they have adapted to this environment. So in the 30 plus years, I have been wandering around the Andes and meeting and seeing the Peruvian breeders with their animals. I have never, ever seen a single case, a single person misbehaving with the alpacas, ever.
I think this is very famous, and it has been reported already from the first Spanish reports after the conquest that this was very, they were very amazed to see that the Indian inhabitants really liked and loved their animals. I think this is a very original tradition for Peruvian alpaca and llama breeders to have a very, very close relationship. So my question is a little bit difficult probably to answer. When I went to Peru for several times and even to Bolivia, I heard from the alpaca breeders, why should we look for animal welfare when we are so bad in our human conditions? And you showed us very nicely the very poor condition of the two alpaca farmers. What do you think could be a solution?
There's no solution, obviously, because neither here, nor in China, nor in the US, nor in Europe, in any place in the world, can an alpaca family with less than 50 animals make a good living. That is absolutely impossible. There's no solution. So
you mean it would be a solution to have more animals?
Obviously, the only solution is to have a more modern operation with a much larger number of animals. That's the only economic solution. The other, in the other scenario, there's no solution. So the only way the traditional farmers can be helped is if the government decides to help them, because us is a small industry, cannot do more than what we are doing right now.
Do you think that the consumer attitude could help the small-scale farmers?
Well, the attitude of the consumer in some ways is the same the world over. They all want the best quality for the least price. And so if we go that direction, the price is not going to improve that much in the near future. The only solution for increasing the price 1, 2, 3 times fold is basically, we think what we're doing in trying to improve the quality of the fiber so that it's worth 2 times more or 3 times more than what it is right now. And for that matter, we need to get rid of the prickle factor in the alpaca. That's the basic solution that we were looking for, and that's all the center of our work at the Pacomarca Research Station.
Yes. Thank you. I've received another question, and I think it could also be answered by you, Alonso. Again, about the animal welfare question, habituation of young animals and the routine of positive handling could be a way to increase the relationship between workers and animals, ? And this could be also used with a small quantity of workers. Do you think that this, for instance, in Pacomarca could be a practical approach?
Excellent question. That is one matter that we have observed with utmost attention in the years we have been working in Pacomarca. And that is that if you are used to handling the animals on a, not a daily basis, but a routine, a certain type of routine, and we do so at Pacomarca to keep track on the weight and to do the proper vaccinations and so on and so forth, then the animals get a lot more use and they seem to be a lot less stressed when they're handled and when they're shorn and so on and so forth. Whereas if we bring an animal from a small-time breeder that has had very little handling, then the animal gets extremely nervous when it comes to handling and much more when it comes to shearing. So the answer is yes, of course.
Yes, thank you. I don't know, Federico, Andrea, Rosati, we are now at 5 o'clock. Can we have 5 minutes more? Hello?
Yes, you can.
Go
Martina.
ahead.
Please
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Martina.
Okay, fine. So I would like to ask a question to Marlene, please. Can you put on your microphone? Again, our question is, are we prepared for the consumer demands? Just to come back to this different situation in South America and in Europe, I think Alonso Burgos and also Christoph Winkler showed us really the very harsh conditions of the farmers and also of the animals. So my question is, as you in your organization, you also deal with different types of animals. In our countries, in European countries, that's my perception, we treat alpacas and llamas as pet animals. So they have a similar status as a cat or a dog, with a rather close relationship, human close relationship. So I think the attitude in South America is not completely, but largely different, because they are mainly used as farm animals for fiber production. So the production interest is completely different as for us in European conditions as pet animals. So do you see a problem with regard to the consumer demands? Because we import perspective from Europe towards a completely different production system.
Yeah, that's also a very good question, where I again wish I would have more background as a sociologist. Like, if I look to some recent studies in alpaca during shearing, then I see that they were done in Europe and under German and I think Austrian conditions. Nonetheless, what I know from some clinicians dealing with New World camelids, that they are not facing pet animal problems here. Of course, obesity might be an issue sometimes, but still these animals are used for fiber production, even if they might have different keeping conditions or housing conditions, or they're used for tourist attraction, for trekking experiences and so on. So it's not that these animals don't have a purpose, and they are living in social groups as they would be if they would be kept in South America. So I think that there's not so much difference from the experience of the animal, except that, of course, we have different climate conditions in Central Europe than definitely in South America in high altitudes. And from the clinicians, I know that we see different issues, mainly with parasites or with other diseases that the animals are here in Europe in contact that do not exist, or that they haven't been in contact in South America. So that is a big difference for the New World camelids living in Europe. So here, from the health perspective, we have different challenges for animal welfare. And yeah, I mean, the shearing procedure is more or less the same. So also these animals have to be shorn. Otherwise, we have an animal welfare problem because they are getting too warm with too much wool. So yeah, I'm not sure if they can be seen as pure pet animals, and if there would be so much difference in the overall welfare state. Maybe in some aspects of the welfare and some provisions, but overall I wouldn't be so sure. But to my knowledge, there is no comparison between alpacas kept in EU and kept in Peru. So that would be a very interesting scientific project for the future, I guess.
Yes. I see that we are going ahead in our time, so it's time for some closing words. I would first of all like to thank the EAAP for organizing this webinar and for giving us the opportunity to share this webinar with all the participants. I would like to thank very much to our speakers, which gave us really very important input, and I would of course also like to thank to all participants who attended our seminar. I hope they were able to get some new information. I'm quite sure that the different aspects were very well covered by our speakers, and to see also the different facets of animal welfare and shearing. I think it's very, very clear that we do need more information, that we do need more scientific work. And I think coming back to you, Alonso, it is a difficult task, and what we can do as Europeans is to support your approaches to improve animal welfare, and to also to improve the conditions for the farmers, the small-scale farmers. I think this goes both hand in hand, and I really appreciate the work you are doing in Peru to support the poor campesinos. So I would like to close the meeting. Thank you.
I would like to give thanks also to all the people Martina said, but also to Martina for an excellent moderation. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. So we might have an opportunity to see during one of the next EAAP seminars, and I would like to draw your attention to the next one. Sorry, I will try to continue. The next EAAP webinar will be on ethical dog breeding. So we keep with ethical animal welfare questions. It will be held on 14th of June. And so I would like to say goodbye to all of you.